Welcome to the Advancement Podcast. Our mission is to reach the lost in America by advancing leaders and churches so that communities are transformed. Join us as we discuss how to stay healthy as leaders, work in teams, and lead change. Come on, let's advance together.
Go for it, Tado.
Welcome back to the quarantine edition of the what is I almost said the Hope Church. the Advancement
Podcast. But
what
you're in
am I
your
doing?
office because you're sitting at Hope Church.
Yeah, I'm all messed up. I'm so used to being on
He's
Facebook,
all
Hope Church
messed
this
up.
and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this quarantine's going to my head. I'm an extrovert, Tim. So these quarantines kill me. I need to be around people.
Look, my wife has told me, she says, we got to find a way. So the good news about living in rural, I don't get to be around people, but I can go outside still. And I cleared fence line for a whole day. I'm going to go after we're done with recordings and stuff today. I'm going to be outside getting ready to start set posts if it's dry enough. I've got about 300 feet of barbed wire fence to build. So my extroversion is spent outside.
Yeah. Ding, 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 ding.
Hey, you know,
Woo!
hey, somebody asked me, are y'all self-quarantining? I said, where I live, we self-quarantine all the time. It's our choice to go see people.
Yeah. We're back. We're back again with Robert Miller, the director of the Church Loan Fund here in the North Texas Assembly of God, and a
former pastor, 22 years in finance, and what sounded like 15 years in ministry.
Yes, sir.
Woo!
The most famous pastor I know from Oklahoma. You're not older than Tim, so.
Father of four.
That's true. I am. Got 4 kids at home right now.
It's okay.
Father of 4 unite.
Everybody's kids are at home right now.
I know. So I can relate.
Unless
the struggle is real.
they don't live with you.
That's true.
I'm trying to put locks on the pantry and fridge so I can have food last longer than a day.
That's right, because yours are old enough to get it for themselves.
I know. It's crazy. All they want to do, they're hungry all the time.
My wife set my young ones down the other day and said, listen, we can't get all the food that we usually do. I have to start eating something other than chicken and pizza. So
that's a crisis.
My kids are feeling the struggle too.
Oh, that's horrible. Hey, my wife made homemade chicken and dumplings the other night. Woo! Come on, bring it, baby.
Come on now. There you go.
All good. So
we're recording this during lunchtime, just for the record.
It's after lunch. We started at 1.
Is 1:44 lunchtime?
For some of us, when we're busy, yeah.
Maybe in Oklahoma.
So Robert, last time we just kind of started off by talking about the fear factor and just some basic things about dealing with life and situations. We talked a little about online offerings because those are just big deals that are facing guys right now as we walk through this quarantine, this COVID crisis where we're not having local church. And we're trying to figure these things out. So let's start by looking now at practical things that pastors and leaders can do, because we all should, honestly, we're going to, at least for the first few weeks, we will see a dip in income because people are going to be more conservative. When the markets are down and people are at home or working from home or getting less hours, all those things, there's just going to be less giving. People are going to be, your faithful hardcore tithers are going to tithe, but that's as mild, that's a small percentage of your church. Then your marginal tithers are going to give less, than those who are givers but not tithers are going to give less, and those that we give some are marginal givers, they're probably not going to give at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that we can do practically. Todd, you were telling the story during the break about saying we can cut spending, right?
Yeah. 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 And that's the thing, our instant thought is let's cut some spending. Let's cut this, let's cut that. But then we go to the fact of, but we're going to need to return to the level that people expected after all this. So if we cut spending, will that affect what's going to happen on the other end of this? Because I truly believe, and this is the optimist in me, I truly believe that we're going to be looking at higher numbers than we've ever seen before after this is all over, because people are going to have a hunger to go back to normalcy.
I agree.
And so Robert, how do we manage that? How do we manage, hey, let's not overdraft the account, but let's still maintain enough to where we could come back at a high level after this is all done?
Sure. Where's the first places to cut spending?
Well, I think some of our spending just naturally gets cut when we're not having services. You're not buying coffee. You're not going through as much supplies. Some of your things that it requires to put on ministry week to week, those kind of things go away. I mean, you have some natural cuts taking place. The other cuts, the two largest expenditures for any church are facilities and staff, right? And so you've got to evaluate those. What do we spend on our facilities and what do we spend on staff? And say, how lean can we get without, letting people go, without having to make some hard decisions? So with your facility, I'll just start with that. Easy stuff like your mom taught you when you were a kid. If you're not using that part of the building, turn the lights off, turn the air up, your utilities, be wise steward of your property in that way. You can let the grass go a little bit, spread that out a little bit so you're not having to cut grass and those type of things. So just some of those things in utilizing your facility, you can delay a little bit or just be wise with, in your utility bills. But some of your fixed expenses, if you have a mortgage, talk to your lender. Maybe they'll let you ease up and do some interest only for a little bit. Yeah. I'm talking to a lot of banks that are offering those type of reliefs to help with that. Insurance is what it is. That's another large expense. Utilities, I know utility companies are stepping up and allowing some grace on payments and stuff. I'm not, expecting you to be late, but just utilize the resources that are being available to us all out there because of what's going on.
That's a great list. I mean, so what you're saying is, pastors, if you're listening, this is the time to do some legwork. This is a great time.
Absolutely.
Just get on the phone, get your staff, get your executive or your bookkeeper calling, have conversations with all these different people.
Here's a great time. Your building is empty, and if you have the resources to do this, start doing that deferred maintenance that's been sitting around for a while. Do that deep clean that you've needed to do. Fix that one wall that's been needing painted. And every church has that room or closet that becomes the catch-all. Now's the time to clean it out, spruce it up, get rid of things. Nobody's going to be in there for a few weeks. Why not have people come back to some updates, not to mothballs, that are overtaking the building. So, anything that you can do to take advantage of this time in your facility and clean it out, repair it, fix the walls, fix the floors, get that deferred maintenance list checked off.
Oh, that is so good. That is so good.
Yeah, I like that.
If you've got the money or if it's not going to cost you much, this is a great time to do some update, to do cleanup.
That's the same really stuff good. We're doing at the district and at Lakeview Camp. I mean, we're trying not to lay people off. We've got a camp operation that is in their busy time of going from 1,000 people on campus to nobody now. And so, man, I'm telling you what, our maintenance list is getting knocked out right now to where Lakeview is all those deferred things. That's going to be great when we're firing camp back up.
Okay. Yeah. That's good. That's good. So that was starting with facilities. That means you skipped over staff. So what do we?
Yeah. Well, no, that's good.
I think he's holding out hope that we don't let anybody go, Tim. I think that's what he's saying.
And it goes into that list I just gave. Keep your staff busy, but now's the time for your staff to get creative. I mean, yesterday, not only did I do online service with my family, but after that service was done, they did a kids service. So start producing kids material, youth material. How can you engage in the kids? One church, the kids pastor, she's reading bedtime stories for the kids at night. How cool is that? I mean, just ideas to engage people. So if you have the budget, keep them busy and get them creative. If you get to that place where you're making some hard changes, your staff is depending on your leadership and how you're handling this. So I always think honest, open communication is at the forefront. And I also think when I was a pastor, I know what it's like to lead when there's more month than there is money. I've been there, I've been through that. And there were many times that I took cuts with my staff. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, I'm cutting your pay and I'm holding out. Like, I was usually the first one to make some of those hard things. Now, I was bivocational, so I had other income sources to help me during
He was
those
a
times.
banker.
I was a banker, so I could do some other things, but some of my staff couldn't. So just find practical ways that you can help, with some groceries and food for them. If you do have to, cut back some pay, supplement those things any way you can. I mean, these are unprecedented, tough decisions that have to be made, but hopefully they're temporary and short term.
Yeah.
I'm writing down what you said because, I get some of these questions and there's some things you're saying that I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. So, Robert, one of the questions is, with leadership, we all have boards and staff that we have to deal with. How do we manage the anxiety, especially from a monetary standpoint, that we face from the different groups that we have to lead? I know for me, most of our leadership's handling it pretty well. But I know that there's probably other pastors that are dealing with people that are very, very worried, very scared. And so how do we effectively lead that when we don't really know what's going to happen?
Sure. Yeah. I don't want this first part of my answer to sound uber spiritual, but I do want.
He's just more. You're just more spiritual than the rest of us. It's okay,
No,
Robert.
Not at all.
You have a globe.
He's got a pulpit in his office.
The lights are above my head. I did that on purpose, but I think it comes back to vision. If you're leading your staff and you're leading your board, your deacons, your elders, whatever that makeup looks like for you, the vision for your church hasn't changed. How you accomplish and facilitate that may look a little different for the next few weeks or months, but the vision hasn't changed. It still takes money to do ministry. It still takes money to facilitate what God has called us to do. So I think keeping it positive, leading them through this in a positive way of saying, hey, God's going to provide. God, the vision hasn't changed. Our purpose, our mission, our passion hasn't changed. It just may look different. The other thing is they're getting inundated with bad news. And then they're bringing all that to you, right? They're watching the CNNs and the CNBCs, and they're watching their 401ks, go down, and they're being inundated with negative information. So they're bringing that into your world, the church world. And so we can either feed off of that, or we can go the other direction with that and say, but here's what God says,
Yeah. Here's a quick plug. We're in the process of getting an author who's written a book called The Emotionally Healthy Pastor on in the next week or so to do a podcast on staying emotionally healthy. It's called The Emotionally Healthy Pastor is the title of the book, and have her on to talk about how do we maintain being emotionally healthy during this time. Because but as pastors right now are going to feel all this pressure, and when everybody always brings their tough news, but there's a whole lot more tough news coming right now than good news.
Yeah, because pastors carry the weight of their whole congregation on their shoulders, and that weight has just suddenly gotten a lot heavier because of what's going on in the world. Plus, man, I feel for our guys out there, our pastors, our leaders, who they're it. It's for some of these pastors who have a staff of 10 or 20 or 30 people, they're still gathering, they're still Zooming, they're still doing all the things, but it's those pastors out there that they're it. They've got some volunteer leaders in their church, but they're it. Who's brainstorming with them right now? Who's helping them be creative? Who's stirring up those energies, to keep them being creative? I mean, those are the ones that we all need to do our part to reach out to, and help share information.
Okay, so now you can go to part 2 of your answer. I kind of cut you off on part 1 to make a plug, but
sure. Yeah, I think it's just the practical things. Allow your leadership, your board to speak into that. They're gonna talk about budget cuts. They're gonna talk about staffing, and here's your time to shine as a leader. Let them know you're ahead of that already. You're on top of that. And you've trimmed this, and you've examined this, and you've looked at that. And, you know, I think they're still desiring for you to be the leader that God has called you to be. So I think as long as if you don't act hard and just, oh man, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know how we're going to get through this. And people aren't giving, and, you know, then they're going to feed off of your unsurety of the situation. So, you know, be confident, be ahead of the curve, be proactive, not reactive, and just, you know, make the tough decisions. But first of all, pray. You know, ask God for wisdom and discernment and clarity on the decisions, that even the hard decisions you're supposed to make, and He'll help us all through this. But I just think our attitudes and our leadership are contagious, and people are going to bring a lot of fear and negative to us. How we lead them through that is going to make or break how we get through this as a team.
So right now we're in the middle of this online, having to jump into this online piece, this virtual church. And just statistically, we know that the median church in America is under 90 people. And when in normal times, it doesn't cost that much. $500, you can have a good interface, you can have a few lights, you can have everything you need to do some kind of quality enough live stream thing that you can hook to your computer. But for those guys, we just didn't do that. We weren't thinking about it. We were just setting a phone up in the back for a Facebook Live thing, and we were good. And now somebody is saying, you know, they've got their volunteer, they've got this young adult, this millennial teenager, or somebody saying, hey, this is what you need. And they're saying, we need to spend $300 or $400 to be ready to walk this out. When they're talk about the tension between the things that we need to do, that's spending money, but at the same time, we've got to cut spending. Where should we be spending and be willing to release our faith in spending? What are those expenditures that probably are a priority right now, outside of paying staff and just, you know, the hard bills?
Well, I don't recommend making any large capital expenditure that is just going to be temporary. So if you're gonna invest into a live stream setup, then invest in a way that's going to last beyond the COVID-19 quarantine season. You know, get you set up to where this is your new normal. You know, spend a little bit more and make it right. If that's not going to be your new normal after this, I mean, I've talked to half a dozen pastors who have that professional setup, and they've opened their doors to say, hey, come over here, record your sermon, we'll edit it, we'll render it, and we'll give it back to you. So it's just plug and play on Sunday morning, you know, for your church. So if you're not ready to do that long-term capital investment, then utilize the partnerships that, I mean, we're a part of the Assemblies of God. What a great fellowship we have, great partnerships and churches just willing to open their doors and say, hey, come on in. We'll help you any way any way we can right now. Take advantage of that. Instead of going halfway into what you want to do temporarily.
And for those guys who are in the North Fort Worth area, our friend Josh Lewis, who's been on the podcast and who was part of the 220 Forum with Advancement back in February, he's opened his studio up for people to come in and record and their sermons and do those things also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we've got a full setup. We'd be happy to help you too.
But I think the piece that you just said is very important is don't make large capital expenditures that don't go beyond. Don't do something just for this season. That's that visionary piece. This is going to be something that lasts beyond this moment in time. Right. We're not, which means that it keeps us out of panic mode. We're not doing something just for now, but this is a shift we're going to make for the long term, and this is the time to start it. This is the launching pad moment for it. That's what I heard you say.
That's absolutely right. This is the best time to rethink church. You know, rethink what it looks like for you going forward, because you know, God forbid, but what if this happens again? What's
Yeah.
the next shutdown? You're ahead of this. You're prepared for it. What's the new normal look like going forward?
I honestly, Todd said it earlier, talked about people coming back, and I think there will be, but I'm not sure church will ever be the same in today's world. In 1918, when the Spanish flu, the world was changing if you look at history, the advancement of time was real. There was little change for hundreds and hundreds of years, but somewhere about World War I, the pace of change started going faster and faster until it just is constantly is crazy around us today. But the truth is that season of time where they were out for the Spanish flu, technology didn't change. There was nothing that changed. So you went back to the same thing in church. But I'm not sure that this shift, it's my opinion, will affect the church forever. There are going to be some things that will not be the same because of this, in my opinion.
I think we're learning that the church is not the building.
That's
we're
good.
learning that every hour, every moment, that the church is not the building. And so what can we do to still be the church?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and we're thinking outside of the Sunday morning window hours. What does it look like going forward that we can still do church not on 1 or 2 hour time slots on a Sunday morning? And what does it look like throughout the week now?
Right.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking for more of the same as far as digital mediums from the church, even after this, because I think what we're doing is we're whetting their appetite, and they're going to be looking for very similar things to that moving forward as well.
So are there any bookkeeping, are there any, so let's just talk for a minute, Robert, churches that have, let's say church has a big nest egg. I talked to a guy this morning, church of about, let's say 110, and they have, they've got about $190,000 a year income, and yet they've got almost $400,000 in the bank.
Praise God.
Yeah. How should people manage if those that have we really talked about those who are short on funds. What do people do when they've got those excesses that they say, well, we'll just keep, they feel like they could just keep going on and just live off the bank account because I've got a couple of years worth of income sitting in there. And we have small church, I also know of a smaller church that runs about 35. Their annual income is around 50,000, but they've got 80,000 in the bank. So there are some churches
Absolutely.
that have they're like, it's not going to hit our budget. But what kind of financial wisdom and insight would you give to the guys that have an excess of resources right now?
Yeah, great. I mean, first of all, great job to those that do. You have those reserves, you have those funds, and I would say to still look to be frugal. You're still going to have some expenses cut back from utilities and usage and those things that are happening right now. Be frugal. But going back to just even with your facility, now's the time to use a little bit of those funds to do those updates or upgrades or cleanings or fixes that you've needed to do. But try to operate within the same budget you've been doing. Now's not the time to commit to extra things unless it's generosity type opportunities that God's leading you to partner with the food pantry in town or to partner with, something that's going on that now you're ready for that. You've got the funds to do this. Now's what opportunities do you have in your community to meet a need? I know a big one right now is schools are trying to figure out how to offer lunch and breakfast to kids that are used to getting the free or reduced at schools. How can you help with that? Now's the time to lead in generosity. You can be frugal on your monthly budget opportunities, but also lead generously in this opportunity. God has prepared you for this moment. He has set you apart and ready for this.
I'm so glad you said that because I've seen over the years as a consultant working with pastors and churches, I've seen churches where there's a stinginess to them. They've they're always afraid of this day coming, the rainy day, so they hold it back and they hold it back. But then when the rain comes, they still don't want. You still want to hold it back because there might be a worse, there might be a worse day in the future. And
Sure.
Right.
and I've had to say when you were talking, I was thinking of the parable of the talents.
Absolutely.
And some of you, the Lord has given you something. He's giving you 5. And in these moments, did he give this for you to invest back into the kingdom during this season? Let's be careful
Absolutely.
that we don't bury it in the ground and the Lord didn't take it from us, because
Absolutely.
So
That's good. That's so good.
that's really good. Well, Todd, any other question on this topic?
Robert, you helped me a lot, and it's good to know, being one of your churches of the 100 million that's out, that if we needed to, we could cut to, because, really, honestly, my crew is very wary about taking out more debt than we already have. But going to interest only would help us a whole lot if we had to. So it's good to know those things are out there for us. And I just have a feeling that everybody's,
and it's not just the North Texas Assembly of God giving you guys, but Robert said that most lending institutions are willing to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where I was headed
with your bank.
Yeah. And that's where I was headed before I was rudely cut off. That most of these places.
Well, never mind. I won't say it.
It's nice. It's nice to hear that a lot of people are giving leeway during this time, more so than I think that we are giving them credit for. Yeah. You can talk now, Tim.
Robert, we've talked through a bunch of things over the last 2 episodes. What would you say from your heart when thinking about church finances during this season? What has not been said that you think it would be important for us for our listeners to hear?
Sure. Well, I'm getting a lot of calls too, just from our investors who invest in our loan fund, because they're seeing the stock market. We're not a bank, so we're not FDIC insured. So we're getting a lot of those kind of questions. And what it is people are just getting a lot of information. And as we all know, not all information is accurate, in the source of their information. So I just encourage people, it's okay to gather information, but before you process it and make decisions, first of all, hear from God. Second of all, go to credible sources. Talk to people in leadership. Talk to people who are in those fields that you can trust to answer those questions in a way that's truthful and spiritual. So just consider where you're getting your information, where you're getting your sources, and then what you're doing with that information. Because I'm getting calls from investors saying, my pastor told me to take all my money out because you're not FDIC insured. Well, that's not great advice, because for one, if something happens so big to where the entire economy crashes and banks go under, insurance is, as we saw several years ago when all those AIGs and those insurance companies had to be bailed out because they didn't have the money. So are we even sure the FDIC has the money, I guess, if you were to think about that. So think about bigger picture. What's the likelihood of that happening? Where are your funds secure? Where are you getting your information? I just want to encourage people in that way, because there's just a lot of noise out there right now.
So don't get your news and your information, or not just the media, social media or television news media, be your only sources.
Absolutely.
Are you saying that everything on Facebook is not true?
Well, only the Babylon Bee. That's the one I found that's the most accurate information.
I love the Babylon Bee that churches are handing out fog machines for home church experiences.
Anyway, we can, this episode brought to you by the Babylon Bee.
Yeah. I don't know that they're quite going to sponsor, but we'll have to work on that.
Hey, we could get a couple couple episodes sponsored by the North Texas Loan Fund. I mean, I know a guy.
Maybe
I know a guy too.
maybe in
but I'm
a
on a
less
spending freeze right now. So
Oh,
yeah, maybe in another time after COVID settled out and the market's back up.
here's my sponsorship right there. Can you see my logo? There we go.
There's my logo right there.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, Robert, thanks so much for being on with us. We appreciate
yeah. Thanks,
it.
Robert.
Good conversation. Really some practical things here. Good advice for guys. Todd, take away. You said he helped you a lot. So what's your big one?
You know, I like what he said about don't make big investments on temporary things. You know, for us, we've made a few investments in this time, but it's stuff that we've kind of put off as far as buying some extra lights for videos and stuff. But now that kind of this time necessitates getting that, but it's something we're going to use forever. But I like, especially for the smaller churches, saying, you know, hey, we're going to do the best we can, and we're not going to break the bank to do it during this time. You know, now if you're looking to do a live feed from here on out, great. But, you know, I have a feeling a lot of churches are not going to be doing a live feed after all this stuff is over. So don't spend so much money, and maybe reach out to a friend that can help you and record you. You know, there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help and don't break the bank to do it. That would be the most helpful for me.
Yeah. So we wrap up today. Let me just say to our listeners, you know, this did not catch the Lord up by surprise. He's prepared.
Right.
He's at work. You know, John chapter 5 tells us that he's always at work, and he's at work in these situations. It's just up to us to find where he's working and partner with him. I believe, you know, when I look back at history, being a guy who loves history, that I cannot find anywhere in all of history since the flood of Noah that the global society has been moved, shifted, and upset like this. So I know that God is at work in the middle of it, and
Amen.
he's got a great plan on the other side. He's up to something. So this is our best day, not a day to be afraid. We'll see you next time on the Advancement Podcast. Thanks, Robert.
Thanks,
See ya.
guys.
If you would like to keep this content coming, all Tim and Todd ask is $1 per show. See how to give, maybe even sponsor an episode or series on the website advancement.cc. Until next week, continue to advance the mission of Jesus.